I love Greg Casar, Democratic congressman, head of the Progressive Congress, and we've covered him a lot on this channel, and I think it's great that he's now growing in profile as a much-needed voice for the Democrats in opposition to the fascist Trump, right? So we're going to jump into him doing a town hall in a deep red district, one that's currently held by MAGA Republican Chip Roy. So take a second, leave us a like on this video. It helps to get out there a lot, helps the channel grow, and let's jump right in and we'll be back with some needed context.
I think one of the most important things I've learned anew is how so many of the most right-wing elected officials break things, do not want services to work, and then they campaign on them being broken in order to win political power. And that's a very, very purposeful strategy.
And to be clear, doing this serves two purposes for MAGA. It gives them something to run on and stay relevant, as they've completely lost on legislative grounds in terms of most political positions. America disagrees with them. But it also gives them headway to defund these things, to better serve their donors, the wealthy elites, at the behest of things that the middle class relies on. And Trump works as a good vessel to sell it to where now middle class people are jumping on board with him and voting against their own best interests. We see this with the Department of Education now in favor of school choice and privatization. The talks of privatizing the post office. Social Security is the discussion every 5 years. Now we're seeing field offices closed, the phone service being terminated, Medicaid is at risk, etc. It's all part of a sick plot to further enrich the top 10%, the top 1%, really, even if it means pulling from things that everyday Americans rely on.
The reason that they're able to do it right now is because they are breaking Article 1 of the Constitution and not bringing it to Congress. If they needed to bring these things forward to Congress as they should, they couldn't get it passed. Because although we discussed that the Speaker of the House is Republican, there's a Republican majority, it's a very thin majority. And they would have a lot of trouble voting to fire people that keep us safe. They would have a lot of trouble voting to get rid of thousands of veterans and fire thousands of veterans. They would have a lot of trouble. And so what they're doing is encouraging Elon Musk to violate the Constitution, to break the law, to break stuff, to then get sued and go back and forth through the legal process while the rest of our system gets left in a lurch.
This is the destruction of democracy that the left promised. It's nuanced, right? It's not something like he's just going to say he's doing. And MAGA so confidently laughed and said it would never happen. But we've never been more vindicated than right now. The co-equal branches are being circumvented. Congress is being circumvented in favor of top-down control from the executive who wants to call the shots, cut funding, control every part of government with no checks and balances, where someone unelected and unconfirmed through Congress is now closing agencies, field offices, forcing mass layoffs. 1 in 3 federal workers are veterans, and it's being done on purpose for the dual reason we spoke to before. Then, when challenged by the courts, they are also minimizing that co-equal branch of the judiciary as well by just circumventing its rulings, hoping that by doing so it can make its way to the Supreme Court, where Trump's hand-picked majority can further expand his power to king-like levels. And as these democratic functions are being torn at the shreds, essentially, they're being rendered useless, MAGA is ignorantly cheering it on because at least it's the red side winning.
Now, we've seen some excuses in the news about why so many Republican members of Congress refuse to hold town halls. They've said that people are paid protesters. And I want folks around, we can look here and move the camera for folks to see if we can make sure folks. If anybody at this town hall here is paid to be here, will you raise your hand? No? But if you are from Hayes County, will you raise your hand and keep your hand raised? If you're from Comal County, will you raise your hand and keep your hand raised? What about Gillespie or Campbell County? Keep your hand raised. Or if you're a constituent of Congressional District 21, will you raise your hand and keep your hands raised? That looks like just about everyone. And that is who we should be accountable to. So thank you all so much for being here.
I wanted to end on this because it's prescient on how democratic messaging should be done as to not get lost in the weeds, especially as the election year comes around. Even in this video, we've dived more into the more nuanced topics, the behind the scenes reasons Republicans might attack agencies, how they are pulling from the democratic fabric of our institutions. This is not what wins over voters, sadly, right? Because it should be. It's very important. It isn't what is center, however, to winning an electorate, though it is still important to discuss, I think, at times, as we did today, important to inform people on. But what should be center to the messaging is, as he's pointing out here, the contrast. Republicans are in real time coming for your retirement benefits. They're coming for your health care. If you're younger, your grandparents' health care, your parents' health care. They are coming for food stamps from the poor. You're one bad choice away from needing food stamps, right? Medicaid, that funds 42% of births in this country. If you have a child, there's a good chance their birth was funded by Medicaid. There was a good chance you being born was funded by Medicaid. They've defunded school nutrition programs, medical research, all to just better afford the revenue hit that the rich guy tax cuts are going to cost, while Democrats are the only party defending these functions. We can disagree on the efficiency of how they are doing so, but they're the only party willing to stand for these things. By also, if you're looking at the people I think should be heading the party, pushing for things like universal healthcare being a human right, a livable minimum wage, free school lunch and breakfast for all students, regardless of income, no questions asked, tax funded higher education to close that bridge to better funded jobs that is a real barrier for a lot of low-income families. Real common sense, everyday solutions that real Americans, middle-class Americans are faced with, and doesn't rely on this fantasy of bailing out and helping the billionaires, and maybe this time it'll actually trickle down to our pockets.